Welcome to my high voltage hustle.
Oh my god, 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 oh my god.
You'll see me bid on my parts car. Woohoo! And you'll see this gorgeous mini truck come alive. Well, before you start tearing it apart, stop. I'm Bailey. I'm an educator, builder, and DIYer. And in this series, you'll join me as I rip apart a Nissan Leaf and install its electric powertrain into a 79 Datsun mini truck. I've wired a lot of powertrains, but this will be my first EV swap from start to finish. Come watch me learn as I go and laugh at my mistakes. So plug in, grab some popcorn, and join the hustle. Woohoo! You just bought your dream classic truck. But before you tear it apart for your first gas to electric conversion, stop. And you need to inspect it first. So in this video, we're gonna go over some key things you need to look at to make sure that you have the structural integrity and correct placement of your donor vehicle before you start installing the electric powertrain. So clearly we're gonna get our hands dirty. Let's get to it. All right, I'm Bailey. This is my high voltage hustle. I am in the EV aftermarket as an educator and technician, and I want to go through using my 1979 Datsun 620 pickup, the key things that you should look for in a donor vehicle before you start taking things apart and before you start planning where things should go. So whether you bought it at auction, barn find, Craigslist, whatever, you need to make sure that you have some structural integrity of the donor vehicle before you start the install. So let's walk through the major things that we're gonna check today to make sure that we're ready to use this vehicle. But like, why does this matter? Because time is money. So you want to make sure that you identify the weaknesses in the build first. And then you can also focus on performance and efficiency. You can save money. It's a lot of planning in it. So we want to make sure that we do this first before I even touch the truck, even though I cannot wait to tear it apart. I'm over here trying to find reasons to use these leaf chairs. So the first thing that we're gonna look at on the truck is to check for rust and weak points of the frame rails, the cross members, the chassis connection points. You wanna make sure that all of those locations are structurally sound. You know, it's fine to have surface rust. I know this is a 1979. We're definitely gonna have surface rust, but we wanna make sure that we're not seeing any flaking of the actual pieces of the chassis and the frame rails or the cross members. It is fine if you're seeing a little bit of flaking from the coating that's on it. That seems natural, like somebody might have put a coat on it that is now flaking off with the surface rust. That's okay. But you definitely want to be inspecting of how corroded is the rust of our chassis. You also want to take a look at the actual bed mounts. You know, this particular vehicle, it's pretty common for it to have a lot of rust on the body near the seam of the bed. And think about it, if it sat outside, it probably sat there with standing water in the bed, and then that could leak down into the actual joints of the frame. So we really want to inspect that and make sure that things are looking good there. Then if you see any holes in the frame or large flaking that isn't just the coating, those are major red flags. You're gonna have to do some welding on those. Luckily, I really don't see any of that happening in my vehicle. That is why I chose it as a good candidate. And really all I need to do is finish up getting off the surface rust on the chassis. So things are looking good here when it comes to chassis and frame inspection. Okay, the next thing that we're going to inspect is the undercarriage and the suspension. We want to make sure that those things are in safe working order. So I have a torsion suspension on the front side of this truck, and then I have the leaf spring suspension in the back. So I need to check out my control arms and bushings and my leaf springs, find out, do I have any worn out components that could affect the ride quality of this truck? Then I need to take a look at the steering. linkage, ball joints. You know, if they're sloppy now, they're going to be worse under EV torque. And then the last one in this section is understanding your brake lines and, you know, where you're going to run your high voltage harnesses. So even though you're ditching the gas, you still need to make sure that your, rotted brake lines get taken care of, making sure you have good ideas where you're going to run that high voltage harness, because your fuel lines are exactly where we typically run high voltage. So gonna go check out and make sure all of those are good. I'm also, when it comes to the braking, I'm gonna need to prepare to add that new master cylinder and eye booster, and how that I may need an adapter because the brake lines are a different size than what comes with the master cylinder. So all of those things are factors in our undercarriage, suspension, and brake system. Oh, and you also, I picked this truck and leaf project because they had similar weight distribution. If you are getting a substantially higher power vehicle, heavier batteries, bigger motor, then you may want to consider actually swapping out and getting new suspension. So make sure that you pay attention to weight distribution in your build. Then continuing on underneath the vehicle, you have to think about the drivetrain traction system. So are the rear axles and differentials going to stay? Are they strong enough for the EV torque that you're installing in your vehicle? What about your drive shaft? Does it need shortening? Does it need upgrading? Does it need a little bit of a degree change? Those are all factors that you need to consider. And then when it comes to the transmission in the vehicle, for my truck, I have an automatic transmission in it. So everything will come out in my transmission system entirely with the gas motor. But if you're going to be reusing the manual transmission, make sure that you check out, what is, that weight of that flywheel, can you get a lighter flywheel? What are the gear ratios of that transmission? And then of course, don't forget to find out what is the gear ratio of your differential, because let's say you decide to go with gear reduction, you need to multiply the gearbox gear ratio times the differential to get your final drive ratio for something that's just going to be direct drive. If you're going to go with a manual transmission, then you need to do that for every single gear. So it'd be first gear times the diff gives you your final drive ratio in first. Second gear times the diff, final drive ratio in second. So these are all things that you should determine and plan for as you decide on your donor vehicle and inspect your donor vehicle. The next system to check over is the 12-volt electrical system. So first off, labeling is the love letter to your future self. Before you unplug anything, make sure that you label everything. Identify where all the grounds and fuse boxes are, and then of course make sure things work. Does both taillights work? Reverse lights? Do you have any aftermarket items that have connected to 12 volts? Fog lights, turn signals, radio, dash lights, overhead lights, all of those things you need to go around and make sure that they are functional so that you have a working harness. You will thank yourself later if you identify those now before you start adding in high voltage wiring. Top tip. Okay, let's go back to braking a little bit. I talked about brake lines and adding in the master cylinder. But if you're going to have regenerative braking, you may want to consider having disc brakes. So when I did some research, like on the Leaf, I wanted to see if I could use the same master cylinder from the Leaf, but it's electronically controlled. And I would have had to run CAN to my controller and have kind of this extra bus to talk to just the brake system. So it made sense rather to probably buy a Tesla Model S, like Gen 1 or Gen 2 eye booster with a master cylinder, and use regen on just my front disc brakes, and then have kind of a pressure valve that changes for the drum brakes. So I won't be able to get the full regenerative braking that I'm looking for, but you do want to make sure that the brake fluid is in good working condition. It doesn't need to be flushed. Let's see, do you need to think about valves and upgrading any of those valves? Are they in good working order? And then the rotors, drums, calipers, are those things all looking good? Pads, do they need swapping out or upgrades. Those are all things to consider as you're deciding on the parts for your build. Some things, I think it's AEM has a really great thing where you can just make a T off the hydraulic brake system, and there's this really small like brake pressure transducer that'll convert the PSI signal to a millivolt signal for regen. I know that works really well for a lot of aftermarket controllers, not all, but there are some pretty affordable options out there if you want to have regen and you already have a really good hydraulic brake system. So make sure you know the ins and outs of what you're going to use to stop, and can it handle EV torque, and do you want regenerative braking? If so, how much are things ready for that? All right, and the last thing to inspect before you even touch your vehicle is the interior dash gauges displays. So some of those things like tachometer, speedometer, fuel gauge, sometimes you can program them to use the analog original, like to show state of charge on the fuel gauge, for example, or using things like GPS signals to determine things like tachometer. But you want to make sure what's under the dash, what can you reuse, what's going to need replaced as you kind of plan around. Then you also have to think about more mechanical things like the HVAC and the vents. Are you going to be able to recycle those with the new high voltage HVAC system? And then always want to be thinking about the low IP components like your fuse box. Sometimes the cabin's a really good place for those things. They're easy, they're serviceable. Behind the back seat of a bench seat in a truck is a great spot for things like a relay box or a fuse box that are easy to get to. And then they keep your engine bay looking pretty because you don't have those boxes in there. So you want to start thinking about placement of some of those low IP or low ingress protection rated components like fuse panels and relay boxes, especially 12 volt stuff. Like, it's kind of a nice place to put it behind a bench seat. So those are all considerations inside the cabin. And then don't forget, if you're going with a manual, got to update that gear shifter. And with my truck, I'm going to need to make sure that I have a clutch pedal because I'm buying it automatic. So I want to go in and actually look at the pedal mounts and see from factory, was there already a pedal mount there on the firewall for the clutch, or am I going to have to plan for that as I add a manual transmission to this build? Okay, now that you've done your full inspection of your donor vehicle, you have determined what's solid, what needs work, and what can be upcycled or refurbished in the build and used in a different way. I know it seems like a lot, but measure twice, cut once, right? Like, you always want to be doing lots of meticulous planning and data collection before you even make any decisions. So what's next is that I am going to go through and make some of those decisions, and then I'm going to start pulling apart the things that I don't need. So if you like this video and you want to learn more about the truck that I chose, please check out my truck search video. If you need to learn a little bit more about electrical skills, you can always go to my skills for your build video. And of course, please like, subscribe, share, particularly looking to get people who are non-traditional automotive into this creative and innovative thing like rebuilding a vehicle and upcycling a gas vehicle. So please spread the word about my channel, and I hope you'll tune in next video for us as we dig into these gas components and the 12 volt harness even more. Thanks for watching. Can lead to, a lot of